Hello, friends! In this video, we begin a large series dedicated to the evolution of battleships, the most powerful and majestic warships in the history of mankind. And we will start with, perhaps, the most amazing and dramatic branch, the Japanese. In just 40 years, Japan has gone from being an apprentice, purchasing obsolete battleships in England, to being the creator of the largest and most powerful battleships that have ever set sail. We will trace this path ship by ship, from the small Kotetsu monitor to the giant Yamato, from the first uncertain steps to the peak from which the fall began. Together we will see how Japan's naval power was born and faded. So buckle up. We begin our journey through the Japanese branch of the evolution of battleships. Our first ship is the Kotetsu. Built in the United States in 1864 as the battleship CSS Stonewall during the Civil War, she was sold to Japan in 1869. It was the first battleship in the Japanese Navy, a small, low-sided monitor with a single rotating turret. He marked the beginning of the era of armored shipbuilding in Japan, although he was of foreign origin. Displacement: 1,350 tons armament. 1 times 300-pounder cannon in the turret, 2 times 70-pounder cannons. Reservation: 89 to 127 millimeters. Fate: served until 1888, then dismantled. Interesting fact: participated in the Japanese Civil War, Boshin War, on the side of the emperor. Fuso is the first large battleship built in Japan, albeit according to British drawings. It was laid down in 1875 at the shipyard in Yokosuka, launched in 1877. It was a classic casemated battleship with a central battery. The guns were located on the sides in an armored casemate. It was a scaled-down copy of the British Iron Duke. Displacement: 3,717 tons armament. 4 times 240mm guns in a casemate, 2 times 170mm guns reservation. Belt 102 to 229 millimeters, casemate 152 millimeters speed, 13 knots, fate. He died in 1897, sitting on rocks off the coast of Shikoku. Interesting fact: the name Fuso is one of the ancient poetic names of Japan. Chinyen is a unique case. It was built in Germany for China in 1885 as the flagship of the Beiyang Zhenyuan fleet. In 1895, after China's defeat in the Sino-Japanese War, it was captured by the Japanese as a trophy and incorporated into the Imperial Navy. It was a powerful battleship with 2 main-caliber turrets at that time, and the Japanese learned a lot from studying its design. Displacement: 7,220 tons armament, 4 times 305mm guns in 2 turrets, 2 150mm guns reservation, 356mm belt, 305mm towers. Speed: 14.5 knots. Fate: served in the Japanese Navy until 1911, then dismantled. Interesting fact: the Japanese kept its name Chinyen in honor of the victory over China. FUJI is the first of 2 battleships ordered in England under the Fleet 6-6 program. It was built at the Thames Iron Works shipyard in London. Together with the Yashima sister ship, they became the first modern squadron battleships of the Japanese Navy. It was on them that Japanese sailors learned to fight on new ships before the Russian-Japanese War. Displacement: 12,230 tons, armament, 4 times 305mm guns in 2 turrets, 10 times 152mm rapid-firing guns, reservation, belt 457mm, maximum, towers 152mm speed, 18.25 knots fate, participated in the Russian-Japanese War, sunk as a target in 1945. Interesting fact: it was sunk by American aircraft in 1945, but before that it served as a training ship for 48 years. The Mikasa is a legend of the Japanese Navy. Built in England at the Vickers shipyard, entered service in 1902. Admiral Togo's flagship in the Russian-Japanese War. It was under his flag that the Japanese fleet won a historic victory in the Battle of Tsushima on May 27th to 28th, 1905, destroying the Russian squadron. For Japan, Mikasa has become a national symbol. Details for the text: displacement, 15,140 tons, armament, 4 times 305 millimeters, 14 times 152 millimeters, 20 times 76 millimeter guns, reservation, belt 229 millimeters, towers 254 millimeters speed, 18 knots, fate, sank in the harbor after the explosion of the cellars in 1905, raised, restored. Since 1926, he has been a museum ship in Yokosuka. Interesting fact: the only surviving pre-dreadnought in the world, KATORI is the lead ship of the same type, built in England. It was a transitional type between squadron battleships and dreadnoughts. He carried all the same 305mm guns, but in a new layout, and had an improved fire control system. It entered service after Tsushima, when the Japanese realized the need to upgrade the fleet. Displacement: 15,950 tons. Armament: 4 times 305 millimeters, 4 times 254 millimeters, 12 times 152 millimeters. Reservation: 229 millimeters belt. Speed: 20 knots. Fate: he died in 1918 after hitting a mine off the coast of China. Interesting fact: rangefinders with a base of 4.5 meters appeared on it for the first time. The SATSUMA is a historic ship. This is the first large warship designed and built in Japan entirely independently. It was laid down in 1905 at the shipyard in Yokosuka, launched in 1906. It was originally designed for 12 305mm guns, but due to supply problems, it received a mixed armament. Nevertheless, it was a step towards independence. Displacement: 19,372 tons, armament, 4 times 305 millimeters, 12 times 254 millimeters, 12 times 120 millimeters, reservation, belt 229 millimeters, towers 203 millimeters, speed 20 knots. Fate: under the Washington Treaty, she was turned into a target ship and sunk in 1924. An interesting fact: the share of foreign components reached 60%, but the design was completely Japanese. The KAWACHI is the first real Japanese dreadnought. Together with the Setsu sister ship, they became the first Japanese-built battleships armed only with large caliber. However, there was a problem. The 305mm guns had different barrel lengths, 50 and 45 calibers, which made it impossible to launch multiple rocket launchers at long distances. It was the first, but not a very successful experience. Displacement: 20,800 tons, armament, 12 times 305mm guns of various lengths, 10 times 152mm reservation, 305mm belt speed, 21 knots, fate. He died in 1918 from the explosion of cellars in Tokoyama Bay, more than 600 dead. Interesting fact: the disaster on the KAWACHI became one of the largest in peacetime. The Kongo is the lead ship of the battlecruiser type. It was built in England at the Vickers shipyard, as the Japanese, having learned about the British super-dreadnoughts with 343mm guns, realized that their technology was lagging behind. The Kongo became the last Japanese capital ship of foreign construction. It carried 8 356mm guns and was the fastest in the Japanese Navy. Displacement: 27,500 tons. Armament: 8 times 356mm and 4 turrets, 16 times 152mm reservation. Belt 203mm. Speed: 27.5 knots. Fate: he was killed in 1944 by a torpedo from the American submarine Sealion in Formosa Strait. Interesting fact: the world's first ship with 356mm artillery, In 1915, the Fuso battleship, the first Japanese self-built super-dreadnought, entered service. 6 main-caliber turrets with 12 356mm guns were arranged diamond-shaped along the hull, 3 in the bow, 3 in the stern. This made the ship very long, more than 200 meters. The architecture was original, but not the most successful. Displacement: 29,330 tons armament, 12 times 356 millimeters in 6 turrets, 16 times 152 millimeters, reservation 305 millimeters belt, speed 23 knots, fate. He died in 1944 in the battle for Surigao Strait, torpedoed and shot by American battleships. Interesting fact, he had the nickname Fuso Hotel due to the lack of active actions at the beginning of the war. Issei is an improved version of Fuso. With the same 12 356mm guns, the designers managed to better group the turrets by arranging them in pairs. This made it possible to shorten the hull and improve the reservation. The Issei and its Hyuga sister ship were the development of the super-dreadnought idea. Displacement: 31,260 tons. Armament: 12 times 356 millimeters, 20 times 140 millimeters reservation, 305 millimeters belt. Speed: 23.5 knots. Fate: in 1943, she was rebuilt into a hybrid aircraft carrier battleship, sunk in 1945 at Kure. Interesting fact, after perestroika, he carried seaplanes in the stern. Nagato is the pride of the Japanese Navy. Commissioned in 1920, she became the world's first battleship armed with 406mm guns. 8 guns and 4 turrets, speed of 26.5 knots, powerful armor. Before the Yamato appeared, it was the Nagato that was the flagship of the United Fleet and the symbol of Japan's naval power. Displacement: 32,720 tons. Armament: 8 times 406 millimeters, 20 times 140 millimeters reservation, 305 millimeters belt. Speed: 26.5 knots. Fate: participated in World War II, survived the war, was sunk in 1946 during the tests of the atomic bomb at Bikini. An interesting fact, on December 2, 1941, the Nitaka Yamanobor team left his radio room, the signal for the attack on Pearl Harbor. MUTSU is the second battleship of the Nagato class. It was built at the shipyard in Yokosuka according to the same project. Together with Nagato, they formed the elite of the Japanese Navy during the interwar period. His fate is tragic. On June 8, 1943, the MUTSU exploded in Hiroshima Harbor due to the detonation of the cellars. The causes of the disaster have not been clarified so far. Displacement: 32,720 tons armament, 8 times 406 millimeters, 20 times 140 millimeters, reservation 305 millimeters belt. Speed: 26.5 knots. Fate: he died in 1943 from the explosion of cellars. 1,121 people died. Interesting fact. Part of the hull is still lying at the bottom. Divers are allowed to dive there. In the 1930s, Japan, having withdrawn from the League of Nations, began a large-scale modernization of old battleships. The Kongo is undergoing a drastic restructuring. Reservations are being strengthened. Now it is not a battlecruiser, but a battleship. A massive pagoda-shaped superstructure is growing, and the power plant is changing. The speed reaches 30 knots. This is how they will enter the Second World War. New displacement: 32,000 tons. The reservation has been reinforced to 203 millimeters. Belt and anti-torpedo protection has been added. Speed: 30 knots. Armament: the same 8 times 356 millimeters, but reinforced anti-aircraft artillery. Interesting fact, it became the most active Japanese battleship of the Second World War. The modernization of Fuso was even more radical. The superstructure turned into a 7-story pagoda studded with rangefinders and control posts. The stern has been lengthened and the armor protection has been improved, but the speed remained low at 24.5 knots. By the beginning of the war, these were outdated ships but still formidable. New displacement, 34,700 tons new power plant, turbines instead of old machines, speed, 24.5 knots, enhanced deck reservations. Interesting fact, the height of the superstructure reached 40 meters. Issei underwent a similar upgrade, but with one difference. Its Yuga sister ship was used as an experimental one for new systems. In 1943, after the death of the MUTSU and the loss of 4 aircraft carriers off Midway, both Issei-class ships began to be rebuilt into hybrids. The aft towers were dismantled. A hangar and a flight deck for seaplanes were equipped. After modernization, 35,800 tons armament, 8 times 356 millimeters, 2 turrets dismantled. 16 times 140 millimeters, air group, 22 seaplanes. Speed, 25 knots. Interesting fact, unique ships that had no analogs in the world. The modernization of the Nagato has turned it into a practically new ship. The stern has been lengthened by 8 meters, a new power plant has been installed, and deck reservations have been strengthened. The superstructure grew, but remained more slender than that of the Fuso. In this form, Nagato went through the entire war and lived until 1946. New displacement, 39,130 tons, speed, 26 knots, new oil-fired boilers, reinforced booking, 127 millimeters added to the deck. Interesting fact, in 1946, it withstood the first atomic explosion, Able tests, but sank after the second, Baker. And finally, the top is Yamato, the largest battleship in the history of mankind. It was laid down in 1937 in an atmosphere of absolute secrecy and entered service in December 1941. Displacement, 72,000 tons, 9 460mm guns, 410mm side armor, 650mm turrets. It was an absolute weapon created for one battle, a general battle with the American Navy. Length, 263 meters. Firing range, 42 kilometers. Projectile weight, 1,330 kilograms. Speed, 27 knots. Crew, 2,500 people. An interesting fact, during the tests, I never fired from the main caliber guns at full power. We were saving the resource. Musashi is the second Yamato-class battleship. It was built at the Nagasaki shipyard and entered service in August 1942. It is almost identical to the Yamato, with minor improvements in anti-aircraft armament. Its fate took shape earlier. On October 24, 1944, in the Sibuyan Sea, during the battle for the Philippines, it was attacked by American carrier-based aircraft and, after being hit by 10 to 11 torpedoes and 10 to 16 bombs, it capsized and sank. 1,023 crew members out of 2,399 died. The battle lasted 9 hours. Interesting fact, the American pilots did not believe that such a ship existed. They believed that they were sinking a heavy cruiser. Shinano is the third Yamato-type building. After the defeat of the Japanese aircraft carrier fleet at Midway, it was decided to complete its construction as an aircraft carrier. He entered service on November 19, 1944. 10 days later, on November 29th, during the passage from Yokosuka to Kure, the American submarine Archerfish was torpedoed and sank. The largest aircraft carrier of its time was lost before it could enter service. Displacement, 71,890 tons air group, 47 aircraft, 1,435 people out of 2,515 died. Interesting fact, the crew was not trained to fight for survivability. The ship did not have airtight bulkheads. The A150 project, also known as the Super Yamato, was supposed to be the next step. It was planned to build 2 battleships with 6 510mm guns and 3 turrets. The booking was supposed to be even more powerful. But the war was already underway. There were not enough resources, and in 1942 the project was closed. This ghost is what the Japanese branch could have become, but it didn't. Planned displacement. About 80,000 tons caliber, 510 millimeters, the largest in history, anti-aircraft armament. Up to 40 barrels of 100 millimeters. Interesting fact, the drawings were destroyed at the end of the war. Only the descriptions remained. The Japanese branch of battleship evolution has ended. From the small Kotetsu to the giant Yamato, it's only 70 years old. But these 70 years have seen a meteoric rise, brilliant victories, technical breakthroughs, and tragic deaths. Japan's battleships sank to the bottom, but they will forever remain in history as an example of the cost of creating naval power and how quickly it can disappear.